Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drum McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at thechangeleader.com. Changing Higher Ed is sponsored by Blackbaud, the world's leading cloud software company powering social good. With their cloud solution for higher education, Blackbaud connects thousands of campuses worldwide. Visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn how they can help your institution deliver a better experience. And now, here's your host, Drum McNaughton.
Our guest today is Dr. Bridget Burns, the Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance, a national consortium of public research universities committed to increasing the number and diversity of college graduates in the United States. Bridget is no stranger to higher ed, having advised university presidents, system chancellors, and state and federal policy leaders on strategies to expand access to higher education, address costs, and promote completion of students of all backgrounds. For her work in this area, she was named one of the 16 most innovative people in higher education by Washington Monthly. Bridget is here today to share with us what she and the UIA have been up to, and she'll have some great tips on what you presidents can do to innovate at your own institutions. Bridget, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. We've seems like we've tried this once or twice before, and it's real fun to be able to finally connect with you.
Yeah, when I always say when your middle name is innovation, technology is notorious for failing you. So I'd love to say that I always have my PowerPoint super on lock and that there isn't ever a technology challenge, but unfortunately, this is often my reality.
Well, I think that's kind of a precursor to what's going on right now. We've got so many institutions that are innovated, inundated, that's the word I'm looking for, with what's going on in the world with coronavirus and everything else, that have to innovate given all the circumstances. So I think that's a great lead-in for what you guys are doing at UIA.
So for folks who don't know, the University Innovation Alliance is a group of 11 universities who are committed to innovating together, scaling up what works, and then sharing everything we learn in an effort to overarchingly close our achievement gap, produce far more high quality degrees, and be able to fundamentally change the sector in a positive way, hoping to start a movement. So we're all normally that's our normal work. And then now in the midst of this, I just got off a call today. We are trying to address the challenges facing our most vulnerable students in real time in the midst of what's going on with COVID. Students are, especially, you see things going on with students who are hungry, who are homeless, who are displaced, who are dealing with all these extra circumstances they were not anticipating. Some of our institutions are having to, spend, I know one of them has had to just spend $5 million extra this week alone trying to address buying hotspots for Wi-Fi for students who are going to be displaced, physically transporting them places, getting them housing, getting them laptops, because frankly, students and faculty not having what they need is a problem. Transitioning the entire institution to distance learning. I mean, that's happening across the board. So what my work is to try and in between all of that to kind of play a shuttle diplomacy and identify where you're doing this. Okay, this other institution has a similar problem. I'm going to share with them what you're learning, or I'm going to connect you to, because nobody really ever has time for that kind of sharing and keeping everyone abreast of what they're doing to innovate in real time. And so what we're doing is trying to make sure to support them. And we know that each of them is advancing at different levels to address the challenge depending on what's going on in their state policy context or their community context. Some of them, their K-12 schools are about to be shut down, or they're going to be shut down until the fall term, and others it's like 2 weeks is what they're told right now, so they can't actually implement long-term solutions. But because they're in a network, they can talk with the folks who are already preparing for fall term shut down, and be able to have a sense of what's coming ahead. So that's what I'm trying to deal with today. But, the challenges, that they're going to continue to face. My job is to pay attention and to support them and to help them move more quickly by moving together. And I think there's going to be a whole lot of this coming ahead.
I think you're absolutely right. It kind of reminds me of what my last guest, Scott Cowan, who's the president emeritus of Tulane, said. When they had Katrina hit, they were actually running Tulane out of a hotel room in Houston. There were a number of them there. And all they were trying to do was survive, keep people alive and things like that. And Scott reached out to a network of about 5 university presidents that he highly respected. And with Scott and those presidents, they put together Tulane's Go Forward program. So it's almost as though it takes a village to raise someone. Well, it's going to take a village for us to get through this, and to be able to share those innovative things that you're talking about makes so much sense.
Well, I mean, I think we're at a different space now in terms of how connected we are. And I think communication has increased. So there are more networks to support institutions as they're going through this. And thankfully, we're leveraging insights from past experiences like Tulane. I mean, Scott has been, like I was just saying, he was on a podcast I was listening to this week. And he's obviously going to be tapped. But I think others who have had to step up in these kind of emergency situations remind people what it's like to transition from day-to-day leadership and trying to do transformational change, period, to, rowing with high seas with squall, right? Like it is a completely different leadership game at the moment, and how you engage in the work, how you communicate, how you take care of your team. It's a fundamentally different skill set that folks have to, if they don't already have it, they're going to build it. And if otherwise, many of them, they've been here before.
Yeah. And that's so critical. I can remember my times back in the Navy, because as you know, I used to fly airplanes and spy on people for a living. And there were times that it was just, hey, pedal to the metal. We're in the middle of a crisis. You get done what you can do, and you don't worry about the other stuff, and you'll take care of it when you get back. Right now, the uppermost thing in people's minds should be the safety of staff, students, and faculty. That's the number one thing right there. And then the next school year, finishing out this term, will all take care of itself. But it's not always that simple to say. It's simple to say. It's not necessarily simple to implement.
No, I mean, because what I'm, it's hard for me not to be a bit of a troll right now, where I'm seeing when presidents make really, I see how hard these decisions are happening in real time. They had no heads up about this. It's a complicated policy environment because you have the federal government, you have state government, you have local government, and they all have to be deferential. Some of them are part of systems where they actually have to follow the direction of the system head. And so trying to navigate while other people are also trying to navigate, it's very challenging. But these campus leaders are, they're making brave, bold choices that they're putting students at the center. And then I see them post their announcements, and I see just like trolls pop in, and people are like, "Oh, refund." And it's like, no, we're not even giving them a second to even figure out how to steer the ship. And folks are kind of clamoring in a negative way. And I have very low patience for that right now, because I know they're going to get back to folks and they're going to make those decisions. But, this is going to affect the bottom line in a big way. I think we were chatting at one of my campuses has already spent $5 million more this week just on keeping students afloat, on investing in things that they have never had to buy before. I mean, how many, thousands of Wi-Fi hotspots for students and laptops and things that will also help faculty transition very rapidly at scale to distance learning and online learning, physical displacement, all of these things. So it is a really complicated moment. And I just want everyone to give a little bit of empathy and understand that they are good people doing the best they can. And honestly, you couldn't pay me enough to do that job. It is far too challenging. I think people they underestimate the incredible complexity of the university presidency. And right now is the moment where it's like, wow, you're really seeing what they're made of.
Absolutely. And it's a shame, because I tell boards when I work with them, you have the single most complex job as a board member of any other sector that you might be a board member, because there's so much you have to know from a higher ed perspective, as well as how to run an organization, everything else. And we're seeing that the folks that are out there in the trenches, what are some of the things that they could be focusing on, should be? One of the things that comes to my mind is obviously you've got to have some great advisors, but you also need to have a game plan that's flexible enough to make changes to as you go forward. Does that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they're having to make decisions day by day at the moment, just because things are changing so quickly. But yeah, some of the stuff that I'm hearing are, I mean, we're focused really closely on the needs of vulnerable students, about low income, first generation students who are going to be, this is going to affect certain populations in different ways. So if for students who have been kicked out of their homes because they came out to their parents, LGBT students, this is a very much more complicated situation. And there has to be a very specific scenario of support for those students. Students who were already food insecure or housing insecure, this is going to be a completely different scenario for them. Students who are international students, I mean, they cannot go home right now. Students in other states who physically, if you can't really travel, there's so much. And in the midst of it, I think there's just a broader kind of psychic stress that all of us are experiencing of going through this. So it's layer upon layer of challenge. And I think, thankfully, the folks who work at these campuses, they are good people who care about this work. That's the reason why they do it. They care about students. I've never met anyone who works in higher ed for any reason other than someone changed their life and they want to give back. And so this is that moment when they're being asked to give back in a way they didn't anticipate. And our institutions really prioritize a student-centered approach, meaning the university was not historically designed around students. We believe we have to innovate and adapt it so that it actually is evolving our process, our structure, how we work around the needs of students rather than the needs of faculty or administrators. And that work is complicated. And so I think right now, I would say layers upon layers and upon layers of complication, but we have the right people doing the work. I've seen incredible acts of courage and bravery this week. Everyone is scared right now. And so being a leader or at any level in a university right now, where you have to calm your family at home, show up to work, calm your team, calm your students, and all of that, keep yourself calm. I mean, in the midst of making decisions that are coming sometimes in a 15-minute window, if anything, I think it just validates the confidence that I have in these people and the incredible passion for the work that they have.
Yeah, one of the things I learned as a Navy pilot was you make the decisions you need to, step by step by step. You put the emotions aside. You make sure you take care of your people, because after it's all done, you can deal with your own feelings and emotions. But the number one thing is you take care of your people.
Mm-hmm. And this is different because I would say it's a different kind of taking care of your people, because now it's virtual. So I live in a virtual world where my team has always been virtual. My team members are in Ohio, in various places in Ohio, in Florida, in Arizona. We had some in Missouri. They're all over. And then we have fellows on each of the campuses. So we have always behaved. All our meetings have been virtual, and our community, our sense of community and our culture is virtual. But a lot of folks are now having to figure out, how do you adapt that kind of way of taking care of the people who work for you into a virtual context. And it's an adjustment for quite a few folks of how you actually run an effective meeting virtually. How you can, there used to be ways where you would pick up insight and intel at the water cooler that you don't have anymore. So how are you making sure to create the kind of space in the midst of this incredibly complex and dynamically changing environment? Most of the folks who are on my campuses are in meetings about this topic the entire day. It's nonstop. It has been for weeks, many of them months. And so any kind of planning is, in terms of, the rest of the work, goes out the window. And that's part of the challenge. Is these folks that I work with were already advancing complex change. They were already doing ambitious things that were going to make a big difference. And So now in the midst, we have a real hiccup. And so how do we keep moving forward? And I think we're going to figure that out.
Oh, most definitely. And as the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. I think we're going to see so many new things come out of this. One of which we were talking about before we started the recording today was innovation in online teaching.
Yeah. I mean, this is, we're at a unique moment. I think you're watching millions of students scale into online learning, distance learning in rapid fashion. You're seeing millions of faculty members who are transitioning their style quickly to online teaching and distance learning. And it is not there are experts that we are every day trying to surface interviews with who do teaching and learning or who are instructional designers. So we're trying to surface their advice in this moment, and they are getting overwhelmed and inundated because the institution always had people doing this work. They had enough for people to maybe 10 faculty at a time to transition, not the entire institution. And so the folks who do that work are super overwhelmed. But what we're finding is that really there is some silver lining here. There is some opportunity of folks figuring out how to adapt their style of teaching, how to evolve their use of different assets into a virtual environment. And I think that higher ed will be better for this, and that we will have much better online across the board in the future. We don't right now, and we have to be okay and have some compassion about that, because transitioning, this quickly while you're going through this tremendous sense of palpable fear in society. I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people who have a Yahoo email. And that's because it's difficult to change something like that, changing your email account, what you're familiar with, it doesn't feel good. So imagine doing that in the midst of this on your phone, driving a car, right? It is layer upon layer of challenge right now. And so what I would just say is yes, we're going to scale up online learning to millions more people. And it's going to affect our country more positively because, we always needed to figure this out. And right now, there is no need to try and get buy-in. It's happening. But we want to make sure that we are figuring out what we're learning in this process that we want to keep, what parts we want to get rid of in terms of how do we evolve in rapid fire fashion. And I would just say in general, I think students are going to discover some new tools for learning. And I know parents are already discovering new tools for learning. They're discovering, there's all kinds of people now think that K-12 teachers are not paid enough, right? I always knew that. Many people knew that, but now that their kids are home, they really know that, right? And people are discovering these parts of the university that they didn't know existed, that there are people who just help you figure out how to adapt pedagogically sound content into an online format. So there's going to be some good things down the road that come out of this. I think right now I just would again advise everyone a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion, and just everyone's doing the best job they can right now.
And take a deep breath. Remember that there still are flowers out there, and it's important to smell them once in a while. We'll all get through this.
I think this week is terrible. So for folks listening, this is the first week when classes are really closed. Many schools are actually still on spring break, so they're about to go through this next week. But the actual rapid fire transition at many of my campuses started a week ago or this week. And so it's really, this is a hard moment for everyone. But in the future, in the next few weeks, everyone's shuffling around to get into places that they can stay self-contained in their environment. They need to, there's a whole lot of setting up your home office, getting all of this transition. Well, once this is over and we're into a pattern of I actually live home, I work at home, I am a student at home, I don't leave my environment. I think people are going to be so grateful for being in school at the same time, because it's going to be a really healthy and productive distraction. And I think that what we're going to find is there are a lot of people who are being laid off right now. And I'm looking to see which institutions can unveil some new opportunities for folks who are in the midst of this pandemic, are being forced, now they're at home and they've been laid off. And we know that higher education use is directly correlated with the downturns in the economy and people being laid off. So but we're, it's a little too late to probably start, a new term necessarily. So what are the innovative kind of small module-based learning opportunities that we can create for folks who are being, who are really being downsized, and this is an unusual moment where they're going to be at home, and I think there's some tremendous opportunity there in terms of learning and leveraging skills in real time virtually.
I think you're right. And one of the things, and as you were talking and saying that, I was thinking accreditors are going to have to be far more flexible with approving things, getting them done. It's going to be, we'll deal with the quality later. We'll deal with the assessment later. Just get them there, get them done, and start moving forward with them. We'll improve as we go along.
Yeah, I think that's part of this we have to worry about is, is quality and protecting students. And because there's a history of certain types of entities taking advantage of vulnerabilities in the market. And I feel like there has been progress made in that space in terms of we have a much better sense of what the boundaries are and what's acceptable. But I think we have to pay attention. And I think that there are institutions that are already accredited that we should definitely trust that they understand the rules of the game. I think that we're going to see some other things happen perhaps, and we need to keep our eyes open. But I've been telling funders and others, like, if you have a deadline for a report, please defer it right now. Like, nobody should be worrying about some due date that is arbitrary at the moment. Like, extend everything and give everyone a little bit of room. And I think in this context, when we're talking about accreditors and otherwise, our job is to pay attention, to see shared problems, to step in and support institutions where we can, but it is also to not try and get in the way, to not to be too cumbersome.
Yeah, very much so. So just kind of wrapping up here, what if you had to say three things to university presidents to be focusing on in today's age, what would they be?
You mean this environment? Oh, they don't need advice from me.
Yes.
I would just say that I think their instincts are solid, that these jobs are incredibly hard. And I would just hope that they take care of themselves, because I'm very sensitive about the fact that the majority of college presidents are much older, and we are in a very vulnerable spot because of how this virus acts. Already one of my institutions, the first lady at one of our institutions has contracted COVID. And I just want to make sure that folks, don't in the midst of trying to lead lead through a crisis, put themselves at risk, and we actually lose our captain in the midst of this. So I would say take care of yourself. I would say also you do not need to lead perfectly at this moment. That I see leaders feeling like they need to still behave a certain way and be, very businessy. No, now I can see your dog walking through the back of the video. I know now what your office closet looks like, or your closet in your house looks like. I've seen you in your t-shirt, and I think it's totally okay for us to adapt how we interact with each other. And I think you got to show a little bit of humanity, that this is not, I do not want to follow a leader right now that pretends like this is not affecting them, because I have nothing in common with that person, because it is affecting all of us. And people will follow a leader. They want to be led by someone who shows, yes, I'm also experiencing this. So I would just say, you do not need to lead like a robot. And I think that, again, presidents don't need to hear this from me, which is just put students at the center. But I also want to point out that there's a lot of faculty and staff who are and administrators who are being affected by this, and just I think they're already taking such incredible care, despite the very challenging circumstances that we're in. And I think it's just people first, right? Like, we're going to get through this. I don't know if that's helpful advice, but again, they don't need to hear anything from me. That's the one thing that presidents have, is too many people offering them advice when, frankly, like, so few people have walked in their shoes and understand the incredible complexity and the weight of those jobs. So I would just say, for the rest of us, my advice is an incredible sense of empathy, because it is 10 times harder than you could possibly imagine. Like, I used to follow university presidents around, I followed Michael Crow around for a year as his ACE fellow. And I remember he's still now, like before COVID, he was starting his meetings at 6 a.m. Meetings. Okay. So for any of us who think that getting up at 6 a.m. is acceptable, like starting your meetings at 6 a.m., they are scheduled in 15-minute increments to 30 increments, but mostly 15 minutes at this volume until like 10 o'clock at night. Right. And they start the day with terrible news coming from every possible angle. There's something terrible that's happened to students, a faculty member. There's a member of the legislature that's angry at them. There's a news report coming out that's not favorable, that one of their board members is upset. And that's just the text messages they get before they open their email. And then they have to go the entire day. And it's just, I think, knowing that that's normal, that would be overwhelming for anyone. But then now in the midst of a crisis that's changing minute by minute, I would just say, do anything we can to help them be successful. If you are a funder, do anything you can to get resources in the hands of these folks, because they have incredible judgment. They know where the money is needed. They are frankly like using their own resources in many cases to help to try and step in and like stop the bleeding for students. And any of us who can make their lives easier in any way, I just say, like, this is the moment.
Great. Well, thank you. That's incredibly great news and compassion on your part. So thank you. We've got to be human to get through this. Lose the teleprompters. Talking notes, fine, but people want to hear from the heart. So on a lighter note, what's next for you, Bridget, once we've survived this?
Well, I mean, it's actually super topical that our next project was going to be around improving online student success. So this is, don't waste a crisis. We're actually going to figure out how we can scale proven interventions for online students across the Alliance, and also adaptive learning. So those are some of the big scale implementation projects we want to do. The Alliance, we are actually positioned to be expanding in the next year. So we are in discussion right now. Our board is figuring out exactly the kinds of the criteria that really exemplifies the kind of partners that we want to work with, and how we can expand the impact of this work. So that is really exciting to figure out how to bring in new allies who share this commitment to this work and who want to be part of this incredible movement.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That's great stuff. I'll make a personal offer to you. If there's anything that I can do from my platform or consulting or whatever, just feel free to reach out. I'm there to help you in any way I can.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for being on the show.
No problem.
Thanks for listening. And a special thank you for this week's special guest, Dr. Bridget Burns, Executive Director for the University Innovation Alliance, and for her sharing with us how UIA has ignited a movement that closes achievement gaps and improves outcomes for all students. I also want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Blackbaud. Visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn about their cloud fundraising, accounting, education management, scholarship, and analytics solutions are powering some of higher ed's top institutions. Our next guest is Dr. Gordon Gee, president of West Virginia University. Dr. Gee is an academic's academic. He's held more university presidency than any other American, 7, and has headed up West Virginia University twice, the University of Colorado, the Ohio State University twice, Brown University, and Vanderbilt University. He joined us from his residence on the West Virginia campus, where he's sheltering in place, to talk about how university presidents can navigate this crisis and what they need to be thinking about going forward.
This episode of Changing Higher Ed was brought to you by Blackbaud, the world's leading cloud software company powering social good. Be sure to visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn how they can help your institution deliver a better experience from admissions to advancement. Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode, at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast at changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drum McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.